The bathroom smelled like industrial cleaner and broken dreams. I stood frozen in the doorway, watching my son Zyn scrubbing a toilet bowl with yellow rubber gloves that went up to his elbows. His tailored charcoal suit, the one I'd helped him pick out just 3 weeks ago, hung limp on a hook behind the door. Sweat stained his white dress shirt. His shoulders were hunched in a way that made my chest physically hurt. Behind him stood Richard Blackwell, silver-haired, 50-something, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. He was laughing, not just chuckling, full-throated laughter. 2 other men in expensive suits flanked him, smirking like they were watching the funniest show of their lives. "This is pathetic," Richard said, his voice dripping with contempt. "My daughter married a man with a business degree from Stanford, and this is the only thing he's competent at. Scrubbing shit from porcelain." The other men erupted in laughter. Then I saw her. Victoria stood off to the side in a cream-colored designer dress that probably cost what I made in a week. Arms crossed. Not laughing, but not stopping it either. The slight upturn at the corner of her mouth made my stomach turn inside out. My son, my Zyn, the boy I'd raised alone for 29 years after his mother died, looked up. Our eyes met. Tom didn't just slow down, it stopped completely. Shame washed over his face like a physical wave. His eyes were bloodshot. He'd been crying. He tried to mouth something to me, his lips forming silent words I couldn't quite make out, but I understood the message perfectly. "Please don't see this. Please don't see me like this." Something inside my chest didn't just crack, it shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces. Right then, standing in that doorway, I made a decision that would cost me everything I'd spent 37 years building. Every dollar. Every sacrifice, every careful investment, all of it. Because some things in life are worth more than money. Some things are worth everything. This isn't a story about revenge. Revenge is petty, small, reactive. This is a story about justice, about dignity, about what happens when a father watches his son being systematically destroyed and decides that enough is enough. This is about the price I paid to restore what was taken. And trust me, by the time I was done, Richard Blackwell would understand exactly what it feels like to lose everything that matters. But before I tell you what happened next, before I reveal how I spent $8.4 million to buy my son's dignity back, you need to understand how we got here. You need to understand the 37 years that led to this moment. Because this story doesn't start in that bathroom. It starts decades earlier, in a small apartment in Austin, Texas, with a widowed father and a 3-month-old baby who wouldn't stop crying. The kitchen table was covered in bills when Zyn was born. Red notices, final warnings, disconnection threats. My wife Sarah had died 3 weeks after giving birth. A brain aneurysm that came out of nowhere. No warning, no goodbye. One moment, she was holding our son, smiling down at his perfect little face. The next moment, she was gone. The doctors said there was nothing anyone could have done. That didn't make it hurt any less. I was 24 years old, working construction for $12 an hour, with a newborn baby and medical bills that would take me 15 years to pay off. I remember sitting at that table, Zyn crying in the bassinet beside me, looking at those bills and thinking I can't do this. I'm not strong enough. But then Zyn's tiny hand wrapped around my finger, and I made myself a promise. This boy would have everything. Not just food and shelter and clothes. Everything. Opportunity, education, dignity, respect. A future where he'd never have to wonder if he was good enough. I started working double shifts, then triple shifts. Construction during the day, security guard at night, weekend handyman jobs. I slept 4 hours a night for 7 years straight. I bought my clothes at Goodwill. I drove a truck held together with duct tape and prayer. I ate ramen and peanut butter sandwiches so Zyn could have fresh vegetables and decent meals. Every spare dollar went into 2 places: Zyn's college fund and real estate investments. In 2008, when the housing market crashed and everyone was panicking, I was buying small rental properties, fixer-uppers, foreclosures. I bought 6 properties between 2008 and 2010 for pennies on the dollar. Fixed them up myself, rented them out, reinvested the profits. By 2015, I owned 14 properties across Austin and San Antonio. By 2023, I lived in the same small house I'd bought in 2005, drove the same truck for 17 years, wore the same work boots until the soles fell off. But Zyn had everything. Private tutors when he struggled with math in 4th grade. Summer programs at UT Austin when he showed interest in business. A trip to New York when he was 16 to visit companies and see what the business world actually looked like. When he got accepted to Stanford with a partial scholarship, I sold 3 rental properties to cover the rest. People thought I was crazy. Jack, that's your retirement. Don't be stupid. I wasn't being stupid. I was being a father. ZYN graduated summa cum laude with a degree in business administration and a minor in economics. I flew out to California for his graduation, sat in the crowd with tears streaming down my face, thinking, Sarah, honey, if you can see this, look at what our boy became. After graduation, he worked for 2 years at a consulting firm in San Francisco. 90-hour weeks, brutal deadlines, corporate politics. He was good at it, excellent actually, but he hated it. Dad, I feel like I'm just making rich people richer, he told me during one of our weekly phone calls. I want to do something that matters. Then come home, I said. Build something here. That's when he met Victoria Blackwell. She was in San Francisco for a conference, some tech industry event ZYN was attending. Beautiful, polished, confident. She came from money, real money, the kind that's been in families for generations. Her father, Richard, owned Blackwell Enterprises, one of the largest commercial development companies in Texas. Shopping centers, office buildings, luxury condos. The kind of projects that shaped entire cities. ZYN was smitten. He flew home for Thanksgiving and couldn't stop talking about her. She's incredible, Dad. Smart, driven, she understands business in a way most people don't. I was happy for him. I really was. But something in my gut twisted every time he mentioned her family. I couldn't explain it. Just instinct. They dated for 8 months, long distance, before ZYN made the decision to move back to Texas. Victoria had convinced him to apply for a position at Blackwell Enterprises, her father's company. It's an amazing opportunity, ZYN told me, his voice bright with excitement over the phone. Richard said he's looking for fresh perspectives, young talent who can help modernize the company. He personally reviewed my resume and wants to interview me. That gut twist got stronger. ZYN flew to San Antonio for the interview. I offered to drive down with him, but he said he wanted to do it himself. Professional. Independent. I understood. I waited by the phone all day. When he finally called, he was ecstatic. I got it, Dad. Director of Strategic Development. 6-figure salary. Equity options. Richard said I reminded him of himself when he was young. He thinks I can really make a difference there. I forced enthusiasm into my voice. That's incredible, son. I'm so proud of you. But that night, I couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong. 3 months later, ZYN and Victoria got engaged. The wedding was 6 months after that, at an estate in the Texas Hill Country that cost more for one day than I'd spend on my entire house. I wore the only suit I owned, pressed and cleaned, and watched my son marry into a family that made me feel small in ways I hadn't felt since Sarah died. Richard Blackwell gave a toast at the reception. He stood up, champagne glass in hand, expensive watch glinting under the chandelier lights. To my daughter Victoria and her new husband ZYN, Richard began, his voice carrying that particular tone of wealthy confidence. Victoria has always had impeccable taste. She knows quality when she sees it. He paused, and something in his smile made my skin crawl. And ZYN, well, he's certainly eager. Eager to prove himself. Eager to learn. Eager to show us what he's made of. The guests laughed politely. ZYN smiled, not catching the edge underneath. But I caught it. I caught it like a punch to the gut. After the wedding, ZYN and Victoria moved into a condo in downtown San Antonio. ZYN started his position at Blackwell Enterprises. For the first 2 weeks, everything seemed fine. Great, actually. He called me regularly, told me about meetings, projects, strategy sessions. Richard's really involving me in high-level decisions, Dad. I'm learning so much. Week 3, the calls got shorter. Week 4, they stopped altogether. I texted him. Everything okay, son? His responses were brief. Busy. Talk soon. Week 5, I called Victoria's phone when ZYN didn't answer his. She picked up on the 3rd ring, her voice cool and professional. Hi, Jack. Is ZYN available? He's working late. Again. He's been working a lot of late nights. It's a demanding position. The company expects excellence. Something in her tone. Can you have him call me when he gets home? If it's not too late. I'll let him know. She hung up. He didn't call. Week 6, I drove to San Antonio. I didn't call ahead. I just went. The condo building was all glass and steel, the kind with a doorman and security codes. I waited in the lobby until someone came out, then slipped in behind them. Took the elevator to the 14th floor. Knocked on unit 1412. Victoria answered. Her expression shifted from surprise to something else. Annoyance? Fear? Jack, this is unexpected. I need to see ZYN. He's not here. Where is he? At the office. It's Sunday. The company has a big project deadline. He's been working weekends. I looked past her into the condo. Expensive furniture, modern art, everything perfect and cold. Has he been okay? He's fine. Why wouldn't he be? I don't know, Victoria. You tell me. My son stops calling, stops answering texts. I haven't heard his voice in 3 weeks. I'm checking on him. Her expression hardened. He's busy, Jack. Building a career. Maybe you're not used to that level of professional commitment. But this is what success looks like. The words landed like a slap. I kept my voice level. Just have him call me. If he wants to. She closed the door. I stood in that hallway for a full minute, hands clenched, that gut feeling now screaming at full volume. Something was very, very wrong. I drove to Blackwell Enterprises. The building was downtown, 23 floors of glass and concrete with the company logo emblazoned across the top. The lobby was empty on a Sunday, but security let me sign in. I took the elevator to the 7th floor where ZYN had told me his office was. The floor was dark, quiet. I walked down the hallway, checking nameplates. Found his office at the end. The light was on. I pushed open the door. Empty. Desk clean. Computer off. No papers, no personal items, nothing that suggested anyone actually worked there. Where the hell was my son? I heard voices down another hallway. Followed them. The voices got louder as I approached, male voices, laughing. Then I heard water running. A bathroom. The door was half open. I looked inside. That's when I saw it. ZYN on his knees in his expensive suit, yellow rubber gloves, scrubbing a toilet while Richard Blackwell and his cronies laughed. The moment our eyes met, I knew I had 2 choices. I could walk away, pretend I hadn't seen it, let ZYN handle his own life like the grown man he was. Or I could fight. I'd spent 37 years building my son up, brick by careful brick, sacrifice by painful sacrifice. I'd worked myself to exhaustion. I'd lived small so he could dream big. I'd given him every opportunity one never had. And this man, this wealthy, privileged, cruel man was tearing all of that down for sport. The choice wasn't even a choice. Can I help you? Richard turned toward me, irritation crossing his face. I'm ZYN's father. Recognition flickered in his eyes, followed by amusement. Ah, Mr. Walker. Your son is learning the business from the ground up. Quite literally. He gestured at the toilet. The other men chuckled. ZYN, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. Get up. He's not finished, Richard cut in sharply. He's on company time, and he'll complete his assigned tasks. Every muscle in my body wanted to cross that room and put my fist through Richard Blackwell's perfectly capped teeth. I'd spent 37 years swinging hammers and lifting steel. One punch. That's all it would take. But ZYN shook his head, just slightly. A silent plea. Don't make it worse. I forced my hands to unclench. We'll talk later, son. I looked at Richard, memorizing every detail of his smug face. You and I will talk too, Mr. Blackwell. Richard waved a dismissive hand. I'm a very busy man, Mr. Walker. I doubt we have much to discuss. You'll make time. I walked back to the elevator before I did something I'd regret. The doors closed. I was alone. I pressed my palms against the cold metal walls and squeezed my eyes shut, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts. No one does this to my son. No one. The ride down felt endless. The lobby was a blur. Outside, the Texas sun was bright and hot, but I felt cold all over, like my blood had turned to ice. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white, trying to control the shaking in my hands, the rage burning through my veins. Then I pulled out my phone and made a call that would change everything. Gerald Chun answered on the second ring. Jack Walker. Haven't heard from you in a while. How's retirement treating you? Gerald and I had known each other for 23 years. He'd started as a lawyer doing real estate closings for my rental properties, then branched out into corporate law and private investigation. Smart, thorough, discreet. I need your help, I said. Something big. His tone shifted immediately, all business. What's going on? I need you to investigate someone. Richard Blackwell, owner of Blackwell Enterprises. I want to know everything. His company, his finances, his personal life, his vulnerabilities. Everything. There was a pause on the other end. Jack, that's serious work. Deep background, forensic accounting. It'll take time, and it won't be cheap. I don't care what it costs. How deep do you want me to go? As deep as it takes. Another pause. Then quietly, can I ask why? I told him. Everything. What I just witnessed. The 3 weeks of silence. Victoria's cold dismissal. When I finished, Gerald was quiet for a long moment. Give me 72 hours, he finally said. I'll have a preliminary report. Make it 48. I'll try. Jack, whatever you're planning, just find me what I need, Gerald. I hung up and sat in my truck, staring at the Blackwell Enterprises building towering above the San Antonio skyline. 37 years of work. Every sacrifice. Every missed meal. Every sleepless night. All of it had led to this moment. By the time I was done, Richard Blackwell would learn a lesson about what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. When you mistake quiet strength for an easy target. When you mistake a father's patience for permission to destroy his son. I drove home to Austin. The house felt too quiet, too empty. I paced the kitchen, trying to burn off the rage still simmering just below my skin. On the mantel sat photographs. Ziwayan at his high school graduation, cap and gown, that huge proud smile. Ziwayan at Stanford, standing in front of the campus gates. Ziwayan and me at his wedding, both of us in suits, both of us happy. I'd spent 3 decades building him up, and it had taken Richard Blackwell 3 weeks to try to tear him down. Not just get Ziwayan out of there. That wasn't enough anymore. Not just confront Richard. That wouldn't solve anything. This required something bigger, something permanent, something that would restore what had been taken and ensure it could never be taken again. I sat down at my kitchen table with a legal pad and started making calculations. My rental properties, current market value, my investment accounts, my savings, my retirement fund, everything. The numbers came to $7.3 million. My entire life's work, quantified in a single figure. Then I called my financial advisor. Martha, I need to liquidate everything. Jack, what are you talking about? Everything. All the properties, all the stocks, all the accounts. I need it liquid, and I need it fast. She was silent for a moment. Jack, that's your entire retirement. That's 30+ years of careful investing. You'd be starting over from zero. I know. Why would you do that? Because some things matter more than retirement. I hung up before she could argue further. By 10 that night, I'd made my decision. I was going to bet everything I had, everything I'd built, on a single play. If it worked, I'd restore my son's dignity and destroy the man who'd tried to break him. If it failed, I'd lose everything and spend my final years working until my body gave out. The risk was total. The stakes were everything. But watching your son being humiliated, degraded, systematically destroyed while his own wife stood by and did nothing, that changes your calculation of risk. That makes total annihilation of your enemy not just acceptable, but necessary. I was sitting at the kitchen table making notes when I heard a key in the lock just after midnight. The door opened. Ziwayan came through like a ghost, shoulders hunched, eyes down. The smell of industrial cleaning chemicals clung to his clothes. When he saw me waiting at the table, he tried to turn away, but I saw the red around his eyes, the exhaustion carved into his face. Come here, son. His face crumpled, just like that. 29 years old, Stanford graduate, brilliant businessman. And he was crying like he used to when he was 7 and fell off his bike. I stood up and crossed the room in 3 steps, pulled him into my arms. It's not your fault, I said into his hair. None of this is your fault. He shook against my chest, his whole body trembling. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry you had to see that. You've got nothing to apologize for. Nothing. We stood there until his breathing steadied, until the shaking stopped. Then I guided him to the couch, the same one he'd grown up falling asleep on during movie nights. He sat down heavy, like all his strings had been cut. How long has this been going on? I asked quietly. 3 weeks. His voice was hollow. Since the wedding. What happened? Richard said I needed to understand the business from the ground up. He started me in facilities management, cleaning bathrooms, mopping floors, taking out trash. He said it builds character. Character. The word tasted like poison in my mouth. What does Victoria say? She says it's temporary. That her father knows what he's doing. That if I can prove myself, I'll get a real position. His voice cracked. But Dad, it's been 3 weeks and it's getting worse, not better. How much worse? Today, he made me clean the executive bathroom while he gave a tour to potential investors. He introduced me as the help. The investors laughed. Victoria was there. She didn't say anything. My hands clenched into fists. How long is this supposed to last? He said 6 months. Then I'll get promoted. If I can prove myself. 6 months. I filed that timeline away. Listen to me, ZYN. I leaned forward, hands clasped between my knees. Can you hold on a little longer? Can you trust me? He looked up, confusion cutting through the exhaustion. What do you mean? I'm working on something. I need you to keep your head down, do what Richard says, and give me some time. Dad, what are you planning? Trust me. Something in my voice must have reached him because he nodded slowly. Okay, I trust you. He left an hour later, heading back to the condo. I watched his taillights disappear down the street, then went back inside and called Gerald. Forget 48 hours. I need that report tomorrow morning. Jack, that's impossible. Make it possible. I'll pay triple your normal rate. There was a pause, then typing sounds. I'll have something by 8 a.m. Thank you. One more thing. I need you to set up a shell corporation. Something clean, professional, untraceable back to me. What kind of corporation? Investment group. Multiple silent partners. I'll send you the details tonight. What are you doing, Jack? Buying my son's dignity back. No matter what it costs. The next morning at 7:45, my phone rang. I'd been up since 5, unable to sleep, running scenarios and calculations. Gerald. Jack, I'm sending you the preliminary report now. You're going to want to sit down for this. I'm already sitting. Blackwell Enterprises is in serious trouble. How serious? Catastrophic. The company's carrying $14.2 million in debt. 2 major projects in Houston and Dallas failed spectacularly last year. The banks are circling. Richard's got maybe 90 days before they call the loans. How is that possible? The company looks successful. Smoke and mirrors. The downtown office building? Mortgaged to the hilt. His personal mansion? 3 mortgages on it. The luxury cars? All leased. He's been robbing Peter to pay Paul for 2 years, and it's all about to collapse. I felt something shift in my chest. Something cold and calculating. How much would it take to buy majority control? Gerald was quiet for a moment. You're serious? Completely. To acquire controlling interest and assume the debt, you'd need around 8 million. Maybe 8.5, depending on negotiation. I have 7.3 liquid. Can you make up the difference with financing? Probably. But Jack, this is insane. You'd be betting everything you have. I'd be restoring my son's dignity and destroying the man who tried to break him. There's no price too high for that. What do you need from me? Create the Shell Corporation. Rio Grande Investment Group. Recruit 3 business partners to serve as the public faces. Draft an acquisition offer. And Gerald? Make it look professional. Make it look inevitable. Make it look like Richard's only way out. I'll have something by tomorrow. Make it today. I hung up and looked out my kitchen window at the sunrise painting the sky orange and pink. Sarah used to love sunrises. She'd sit on the back porch with her coffee, watching the day begin. Honey, I whispered to the empty room. I'm about to spend every dollar we ever saved. But I think you'd understand. I think you'd do the same thing. The morning sun climbed higher. My phone buzzed with Gerald's email. The preliminary report was devastating. Page after page of financial disasters, bad investments, failed projects, desperate loans at predatory interest rates. Richard Blackwell had built a house of cards, and all it needed was one strong wind to collapse. I was about to become that wind. Over the next 2 weeks, I orchestrated the most complex financial maneuver of my life. I liquidated 19 rental properties, sold them fast, below market value, because time mattered more than price. I cashed out investment accounts, retirement funds, everything. Martha, my financial advisor, called me crying. Jack, please reconsider. You're throwing away your entire future. No, I said calmly. I'm buying my son's future. That's different. Meanwhile, Gerald worked miracles. He created Rio Grande Investment Group with 3 public partners. Marcus Chun, a commercial real estate developer I'd helped finance 15 years ago. David Rodriguez, who owned a successful construction company in Houston. And Jennifer Park, a corporate attorney who specialized in acquisitions. Good people. Smart people. People who owed me favors and asked no questions. We met at a conference room in downtown Austin, away from prying eyes. Gerald laid out the plan. Rio Grande Investment Group offers to acquire 60% of Blackwell Enterprises for $8.4 million. cash offer, 72-hour response deadline. We assume the debt, restructure the company, install new leadership. Marcus frowned. That's buying a sinking ship. That's the point. Richard thinks he's getting rescued. He doesn't know we're planning to keelhaul him. What about the employees? Jennifer asked. They're innocent in this. We protect them, I said firmly. This isn't about destroying livelihoods. It's about removing a cancer. David leaned back in his chair. And your son? Gets installed as CEO. He has the degree, the training, the intelligence. He just needs the opportunity. And revenge against his father-in-law? That's not revenge, I said quietly. That's justice. There's a difference. While we prepared the acquisition, ZYN continued to endure hell. He called me every few days, his voice getting thinner, more hollow. Week 4, Richard made him serve coffee at a board meeting wearing a janitor's uniform. Week 5, Richard had him clean the parking garage, deliberately in view of ZYN's former colleagues from the consulting firm who were visiting. Week 6, Richard invited potential clients to tour the facilities and introduced ZYN as an example of what happens when people think a degree makes them special. Each call from ZYN broke my heart a little more, but each call also strengthened my resolve. Dad, I don't know how much longer I can do this. Just a little longer, son. I promise it's almost over. What's almost over? Trust me. I wanted to tell him everything, to give him hope, but I couldn't risk it getting back to Richard through Victoria. So ZYN suffered in silence while I built my weapon. On day 42 of ZYN's nightmare, Gerald called. The offer's ready. Everything's clean, legal, airtight. Richard won't see it coming. Send it. Are you sure? Gerald, for the last 42 days, I've watched my son being systematically destroyed by a man who gets pleasure from cruelty. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. There was a pause. Then quietly, okay, let's finish this. The FedEx envelope arrived at Blackwell Enterprises at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday. Richard's secretary signed for it, marked it urgent, and placed it on his desk. Richard opened it at 3:15, alone in his office. Gerald had a contact inside the company who fed us details. Richard read the letter twice. Called his lawyer. Called his accountant. Called his banker. By 4 p.m., his office was full of people poring over the offer. By 5 p.m., Richard understood the truth. Rio Grande Investment Group was legitimate. They had the capital. They'd done their due diligence. They knew everything. And they were offering him the only life raft available before the ship went down. Gerald's phone rang at 6. It was Richard's lawyer, Douglas Fairfax. We'd like to meet with your clients to discuss the proposal. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Hotel Emma in San Antonio. Neutral territory. We'll be there. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the meeting. Thinking about the moment Richard would realize who'd been behind everything. Thinking about ZYN, still suffering, not knowing rescue was 24 hours away. At 3 a.m., I got up and looked at the photos on the mantel. ZYN through the years. All the moments that mattered. First day of school. Little League. High school graduation. College acceptance letter. All of it leading to this. I'd spent 37 years building towards something I couldn't name. Now I knew what it was. Not success. Not wealth. Not comfort. Dignity. The thing that makes us human. The thing that separates existence from life. Richard had tried to take that from my son. Tomorrow, I'd take everything from Richard. The morning of the meeting, I dressed carefully. Not a suit. Jeans, work boots, a clean button-down shirt. I wanted Richard to see exactly who'd beaten him. Gerald picked me up at 8. We drove to San Antonio in his Mercedes, Marcus, David, and Jennifer following in David's truck. You ready? Gerald asked as we pulled into the Hotel Emma parking lot. I've been ready for 42 days. The conference room was elegant, all dark wood and leather chairs. Richard was already there with his lawyer Douglas, his accountant Lawrence Bennett, and his head of operations Cecilia Marsh. Richard looked tired. The kind of tired that comes from weeks of sleepless nights and mounting desperation. He'd lost weight. His expensive suit hung a little loose. Good morning, gentlemen. And lady. Gerald nodded at Cecilia. Thank you for meeting with us. Douglas Fairfax spoke first. My client has reviewed your proposal. Before we proceed, he has questions about the principles behind Rio Grande Investment Group. Understandable, Gerald said smoothly. Let me introduce our team. Marcus Chun, commercial real estate. David Rodriguez, construction and development. Jennifer Park, corporate law and acquisitions. And our primary investor, Jack Walker. Richard's head snapped up. His face went through a rapid progression. Confusion, recognition, disbelief, horror. No. The word came out strangled. No, this is impossible. You're a construction worker. Small business owner, I corrected calmly. 37 years building rental properties, making smart investments, living below my means while you were leasing Maseratis and mortgaging mansions. Richard turned to Douglas. This can't be legal. It's completely legal, Douglas said quietly. I've reviewed everything. Mr. Walker's investment group has the capital, the corporate structure, and legitimate business purposes. This is a standard acquisition offer. Richard's face flushed red. I won't sell my company to him. Then don't, I said calmly. Walk away. In 60 days, the banks foreclose. You lose everything. Your company, your house, your cars, your reputation. Everything. Why? His voice cracked. Why are you doing this? I leaned forward, hands clasped on the table. 43 days ago, I walked into your building looking for my son. I found him on his knees in a bathroom, scrubbing your toilet, while you and your friends laughed at him, called him worthless. You humiliated my son, a Stanford graduate with more intelligence and integrity in his little finger than you have in your entire body. You degraded him. You broke him. And you did it for fun. He was learning the business. He was learning humility. You were teaching him cruelty. There's a difference. I paused, letting the words sink in. You made a calculation, Richard. You saw my son and assumed he was weak because he was kind. You saw me and assumed I was powerless because I work with my hands. You made the oldest mistake in the world. You mistook quiet strength for weakness. Richard's hands were shaking. What do you want? Sign the papers. Walk away. Never speak to my son again. And there's one more thing. What? Your daughter files for divorce. Ziwayan deserves better than someone who stood by and watched him be destroyed. You can't demand that. I just did. Gerald slid the contract across the table. 60% ownership for $8.4 million. You keep 40% and a consultant position at $80,000 annually. It's more than generous given your situation. It's theft. It's rescue, Lawrence Bennett said quietly. The accountant had been silent until now. Sir, if you don't take this, we're done. Finished. The banks will liquidate everything. At least this way you keep something. Richard stared at the papers like they might bite him. How do I know you won't destroy the company out of spite? Because I'm not you, I said simply. I'm going to save it. Restructure it. Turn it into something worth being proud of. And my son is going to run it. Your son? Richard's voice dripped with contempt. Has no experience running a company. He has a Stanford MBA, 2 years at a top consulting firm, and more natural leadership ability than you've ever had. Plus, he knows what it's like to be at the bottom. He won't forget that. Unlike some people. The room went silent. Richard looked at his lawyer, his accountant, his operations director. All three of them nodded slightly. He had no choice, and everyone in the room knew it. I need time to think. You have 24 hours, Gerald said. After that, we moved to our second choice acquisition. Richard's eyes widened. There's another company? There's always another company, Mr. Blackwell. You're not as special as you think you are. We stood to leave. At the door, I paused and turned back. Oh, and Richard? One more thing. He looked up, defeat already settling into his features. Ziwayan starts as CEO on Monday. You'll report to him if you choose to stay on as a consultant. Otherwise, clean out your desk. You're serious. Completely. Gerald and I walked out. Behind us, I heard Richard's voice, shaky and small, asking his lawyer if there was any way out. The answer was no. There was never any way out. I'd made sure of that. We drove back to Austin in silence. Gerald finally spoke as we hit the city limits. That was the most elegant destruction I've ever witnessed. It's not destruction, I said. It's restoration. Destruction would have been going in there and beating him unconscious. I considered it, but that would have made me like him. This way, I used his own weapon against him. Money. The thing he valued above everything else. The thing he thought made him powerful. Justice, Gerald said quietly, tastes sweeter than revenge. Always. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a calculator, a legal pad, and the grim satisfaction of knowing I'd bet everything and won. My net worth had gone from $7.3 million to approximately $80,000 in available cash. Everything else was tied up in the acquisition, in legal fees, in restructuring costs. I'd spent 37 years building financial security, and I'd demolished it in 6 weeks. If someone had told me 6 months ago that I'd voluntarily make myself almost broke at 61 years old, I would have called them insane. But sitting there, doing the math, I felt no regret. Not even a whisper. My phone rang at 9 p.m. Gerald. Richard signed. It's done. I closed my eyes. Thank you. There's a press release going out tomorrow announcing the acquisition and leadership change. ZYN Walker named CEO effective immediately. Richard Blackwell transitioning to consultant role. How did Richard take it? Like a man who just lost everything that mattered. Good. Jack, I have to ask. Was it worth it? Every penny. Every risk. Every dollar. All of it. I hung up and sat in the silence of my kitchen. Then I did something I hadn't done since Sarah died. I cried. Not from sadness. From relief. From exhaustion. From the overwhelming weight of knowing I'd just made the biggest gamble of my life and won my son's dignity back. Tomorrow, I'd tell ZYN everything. Tomorrow, I'd watch him step into the role he deserved. Tomorrow, the restoration would begin. But tonight, I let myself feel the full weight of what I'd done. I'd spent every dollar. I'd risked everything. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Because some things matter more than money. Some things matter more than security. Some things matter more than anything. Dignity is one of them. Friday morning, I drove to San Antonio. ZYN didn't know I was coming. He thought he was going to another day of humiliation, another day of scrubbing toilets and taking verbal abuse. Instead, he was about to learn that his life had just changed completely. I parked outside the Blackwell Enterprises building at 8:45. The morning sun reflected off the glass, turning the whole structure into a monument of light. I called ZYN. Hey, Dad. His voice was tired. Everything okay? Where are you right now? At the building. About to go in. Why? Stay in your car. I'm in the parking lot. I'll be right there. What? Dad, what are you doing here? Trust me. I found his Honda in the employee section, far from the executive spaces. He was sitting behind the wheel wearing his suit, but I could see the yellow rubber gloves on the passenger seat. The ones he'd have to put on again. He got out when he saw me approaching, confusion and worry on his face. Dad, seriously, what's going on? If Richard sees you here, get in my truck. We need to talk. He followed me to my truck, and we sat there in the parking lot while early arriving employees walked past. I have something to tell you, I began, and you're not going to believe it. What? 6 weeks ago, I started investigating Richard and Blackwell Enterprises. I found out the company's in massive debt, on the verge of collapse. So I made a decision. I told him everything. The liquidation of my assets. Gerald and the Shell Corporation. The acquisition offer. The meeting yesterday. Richard's signature. ZYN's face went white. You bought the company? 60% of it. $8.4 million. That's everything, Dad. That's your entire life savings. That's your retirement. I know. Why would you do that? I looked at my son, this incredible man I'd raised, this person who'd endured 6 weeks of hell and somehow still had kindness in his eyes. Because watching you be destroyed was destroying me. Because some things matter more than retirement. Because you deserve better and I had the power to give it to you. Tears welled up in his eyes. Dad, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything yet. There's more. What else could there possibly be? You're the new CEO. You start Monday. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Richard's been demoted to consultant. If he stays, he reports to you. If he doesn't, he leaves. Either way, the company is yours to run. Me? ZYN, you have a Stanford MBA, consulting experience, and you've literally worked every level of this company from the bottom up. You know more about what needs to change than anyone. But I've only been here 6 weeks. Cleaning toilets and taking abuse. You learn more about what's broken in 6 weeks than Richard learned in 20 years of running the place. He sat back, trying to process it. What about Victoria? Your marriage is your choice, I said carefully. But you deserve a partner who stands up for you, not someone who watches you suffer. She's filing for divorce. Richard made it part of the deal. Part of the ZYN's voice was faint. I told him it was non-negotiable. You deserve better. We sat in silence for a moment. Then ZYN started laughing. Not happy laughter. Shocked, overwhelmed, can't believe this is real laughter. You spent $8 million to make my father-in-law my employee. I spent $8 million to restore your dignity and give you the opportunity you earned. There's a difference. He wiped his eyes. What happens now? Now, I said, checking my watch. You go inside for a company-wide meeting at 10 a.m. Gerald's already here, setting it up. You're going to stand in front of every employee and tell them things are changing. That dignity and respect start today. What about Richard? He's in his office packing. Security's supervising. He'll be gone by noon. Ziwayan took a shaky breath. I don't know if I can do this. You already did the hard part, son. You survived. Leadership is easy compared to what you've been through. At 9:55, we walked into the building together. Amanda at reception saw us and burst into tears. Is it true? Is he really gone? I asked. Richard's transitioning out, I said carefully. New leadership starts today. She came around the desk and hugged Ziwayan. I'm so sorry. I should have said something. Should have done something. It's not your fault, Ziwayan said quietly. None of this was your fault. The conference room was packed. 87 employees, anxious and uncertain. Rumors had been flying since the press release went out at 8 a.m. Gerald stood at the front with Marcus, David, and Jennifer. I guided Ziwayan to stand beside them. The room went silent. Good morning, Gerald began. I'm Gerald Chun with Rio Grande Investment Group. As of yesterday evening, my investment group acquired controlling interest in Blackwell Enterprises. Effective immediately, this company will operate under new leadership with new values. He gestured to Ziwayan. This is Ziwayan Walker, your new CEO. The room erupted in whispers. Some people looked shocked. Some looked relieved. A few looked angry. Ziwayan stepped forward. His voice was shaky at first. 6 weeks ago, I joined this company as Director of Strategic Development. That position never materialized. Instead, I spent 6 weeks cleaning bathrooms, mopping floors, and taking verbal abuse. Some of you saw it. Some of you looked away. I don't blame anyone. I understand fear. His voice got stronger. But the fear ends today. This company will be different. You'll all be treated with dignity, from maintenance to executive. No one will be humiliated. No one will be degraded. We'll build something better together. An older man in the back stood up. Thomas Reynolds from maintenance. Mr. Walker, I was there when your father-in-law, I was there when Richard Blackwell made you clean the executive bathroom. I wanted to say something. I'm sorry I didn't. Ziwayan looked at him. You're saying something now, Thomas. That takes courage. What's your position here? Maintenance supervisor. How long? 17 years. You're promoted to Director of Facilities Management. Effective immediately. Salary doubled. The room gasped. Thomas's eyes went wide. Sir, I didn't ask for this to get you're not asking, Ziwayan said. You're receiving what you deserve. Anyone else who stood by me in the last 6 weeks, who showed me kindness, you'll be recognized. This company rewards character now, not just credentials. He paused, looking around the room. If you want to stay and build something better, you're welcome. If you want to leave, I understand. But if you stay, know this, we're done with cruelty. We're done with humiliation. We start fresh today. The applause started hesitant, then grew genuine and sustained. After the meeting, employees approached Ziwayan one by one. Some apologized. Some thanked him. Some just shook his hand. I stood in the back watching my son, this incredible man, handle each interaction with grace. Gerald appeared beside me. You did good, Jack. We did good, I corrected. Thank you for everything. He smiled. What's next for you? I shrugged. Find a job, probably. I'm almost broke. You could stay on as a consultant here. Ziwayan would probably appreciate having you close. I shook my head. This is his victory. His company. His future. I'm just the father who made it possible. Besides, I'm 61, not dead. I'll figure something out. At noon, security escorted Richard out of the building. He carried a single cardboard box, his personal effects. Ziwayan and I watched from the third-floor window as Richard loaded the box into his leased Mercedes. He looked up, saw us watching. For a moment, our eyes met. I expected to see hatred, anger, rage. Instead, I saw something that looked like broken defeat. He got in his car and drove away. That's it. Ziwayan asked quietly. That's it. It feels anticlimactic. Justice often does, I said. Revenge would have been dramatic. This is just necessary. Over the next 6 months, I watched my son transform Blackwell Enterprises into something entirely new. First, he renamed it Walker and Associates Development. Fresh start, fresh identity. Second, he restructured everything. Fair wages across all levels. Profit sharing for employees. Transparent accounting. He brought in consultants to assess every project and every contract. Found millions in waste and corruption. Cut it all out. Third, and most importantly, he changed the mission. The company had been about maximizing profit at any cost. ZYN shifted to sustainable development with community impact. Their first new project was affordable housing on San Antonio's west side, the same neighborhood where he'd grown up visiting his grandmother. Building homes for people, not just profit. The company turned profitable in month 4. By month 6, they'd won 3 major contracts and hired 40 new employees. ZYN was featured in Texas Monthly as one of the state's rising business leaders. The article mentioned his unusual path to CEO, leaving out the ugliest details but capturing the essence. A man who'd worked every level of the company and understood it from the ground up. As for Richard, I heard through Gerald that he lost his mansion to foreclosure. Cecilia divorced him, citing financial irresponsibility and emotional cruelty. He moved into a small apartment in the suburbs. Tried to start a consulting business, but his reputation preceded him. Last I heard, he was working as a sales associate at a commercial real estate firm, making $60,000 a year. Victoria remarried quickly. Some venture capitalist from Dallas, older, wealthier. Just another transaction. ZYN signed the divorce papers without contest. Told me later it was the easiest decision he'd ever made. 3 months after taking over the company, ZYN met Elena Martinez. She was the lead architect on their West Side housing project. Their first conversation was about building codes and sustainable materials. She had no idea who his father-in-law had been. Didn't care about his last name or his company. Just cared that he listened to her ideas and treated her like an equal. He brought her to Sunday dinner at my house 8 weeks later. I made pancakes and bacon, the same breakfast I'd made him 1,000 times growing up. She told stories about growing up in Laredo, putting herself through architecture school, fighting for respect in a male-dominated field. After she left, ZYN stayed behind to help clean up. I like her, I said. Me too, Dad. She's real. Not like Victoria. She sees me, not what I can do for her. For months later, he proposed. They got married at a small ceremony in Austin, just close friends and family. Elena's parents, her younger brother, a few colleagues. Thomas Reynolds from the company. Gerald and his wife. The reception was in my backyard, strings of lights and folding tables, mariachi music and homemade tamales. Nothing fancy. Everything real. ZYN pulled me aside during the reception. Thank you, Dad. For everything. For not giving up on me. For taking the risk. I hugged him. You would have done the same for your kid. He pulled back. I don't know if I would have been that brave. You will be, I said. When the time comes, you'll surprise yourself. They moved into a house in Alamo Heights, modest by San Antonio standards. ZYN insisted on paying for it himself. No help from me. I'm proud of that. As for me, I took a job as a project manager for a mid-sized construction company in Austin. $55,000 a year, decent benefits. It was a massive pay cut from what I'd been making from my rental income, but honest work. I downsized my life. Sold the house I'd lived in for 20 years, bought a small condo. Drove the same old truck. Saved what I could. People asked if I regretted spending $8 million on what amounted to revenge against my son's father-in-law. I never regretted it. Not once. Not even for a second. Because here's what people don't understand about that decision. It wasn't about the money. It was never about the money. Money is a tool. You can use it to build security, to accumulate more money, to insulate yourself from the world. Or you can use it to restore what was broken, to fight for the people you love, to prove that dignity matters more than dollars. I spent 37 years accumulating wealth so I could spend it all in 6 weeks restoring my son's humanity. That's not a bad trade. That's the best trade I ever made. 1 year after the acquisition, ZYN invited me to the company's annual gala. It was held at the same venue where he'd married Victoria, the estate in the Hill Country. But this time, the event wasn't about showing off wealth. It was about celebrating the employees who'd built something real. Thomas Reynolds won Employee of the Year. ZYN handed him the award personally, in front of 300 people, and told the story of how Thomas had shown him kindness during the darkest period of his life. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. At the end of the night, ZYN stood at the podium for closing remarks. He thanked the employees, the partners, the clients. Then he called me up to the stage. I don't like being in front of crowds, never have, but I walked up there because my son asked. ZYN put his arm around my shoulders. This company exists because of this man, he said. Not because he funded the acquisition. Because he taught me the difference between wealth and value. Wealth is what you have. Value is who you are, and what you do for others. He paused, emotion thick in his voice. My father spent every dollar he ever saved to buy this company. Not for himself. For me. To restore something that had been taken. To prove that dignity matters. I don't know if I'll ever fully grasp the magnitude of that sacrifice, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of it. The crowd stood and applauded. I hugged my son, feeling prouder than I'd ever felt in my entire life. After the gala, Ziwayan and I sat on the estate's back porch, looking out at the hill country stars. You know what the crazy thing is? Ziwayan said. What? If none of this had happened, if Richard had just given me the job I was promised, I'd probably be another corporate drone right now. Pushing papers, chasing bonuses, never really making a difference. I nodded. Suffering can teach you things success never will. I learned what it's like to be powerless. To be humiliated. To be treated like you're worthless. He looked at me. I'll never forget that. And I'll never let anyone in my company feel that way. That's the lesson, son. That's what those 6 weeks were worth. 2 years after the acquisition, Elena gave birth to twins. A boy and a girl. They named the boy Jack, after me. Named the girl Sarah, after Ziwayan's mother. I held them both in the hospital, these tiny perfect humans, and felt the circle complete itself. 37 years ago, I'd held Ziwayan the same way, terrified and alone, wondering how I'd possibly be enough. Now I was holding his children, knowing I'd done something right. The story could end there, with everything tied up neatly. Villain defeated, hero triumphant, family restored. But life isn't that clean. 3 years after the acquisition, Richard Blackwell died. Heart attack, sudden and unexpected. He was 55 years old. Ziwayan got the call from Victoria. She wanted him to know, even though they hadn't spoken since the divorce. He was working late, she said, alone in his apartment. The landlord found him the next day. Ziwayan came to my house that night, quiet and contemplative. I thought I'd feel something, he said. Relief, satisfaction, I don't know. But I just feel sad. Why? Because he destroyed himself. We didn't destroy him. We just stopped letting him destroy us. And that broke him. I poured us both whiskey, and we sat on my porch as the sun went down. Did I go too far? Ziwayan asked. Making the divorce part of the deal? You protected yourself, I said. That's not cruelty. That's wisdom. But it contributed to his isolation. His loneliness. That contributed to his death. No, I said firmly. His choices contributed to his death. His cruelty. His arrogance. His inability to see people as anything other than tools for his own ego. You didn't do that to him. He did it to himself. Ziwayan was quiet for a long moment. I'm not going to his funeral. That's your choice. Do you think that makes me a bad person? I think it makes you human. You don't owe your abuser your grief. We sat in silence, drinking whiskey, watching the stars come out. I never wanted him dead, Ziwayan finally said. I just wanted him to understand what he'd done. To feel some consequence for his actions. He felt it, I said. He lost everything that mattered to him. His company, his wealth, his status, his family. He felt it. That should have been enough. Should have been. But hatred and regret will eat you alive if you let them. My advice? Let it go. He made his choices. You made yours. His ending doesn't diminish your beginning. 4 years after the acquisition, Walker and Associates Development completed their 10th affordable housing project. 567 families living in quality homes they could actually afford. Ziwayan stood at the ribbon cutting with Elena and their twins, now toddlers, running around the newly landscaped common area. I stood in the back of the crowd, watching. A reporter from the local news asked Ziwayan about the company's mission. Why focus on affordable housing when luxury development is more profitable? Ziwayan smiled. Because I remember what it's like to feel small. To feel like you don't matter. These families matter. These homes matter. Profit is important, but purpose is essential. The reporter followed up. Your company has an unusual origin story. Can you tell us about that? Ziwayan glanced back at me. Caught my eye. I shook my head slightly. His story to tell or not tell. He turned back to the reporter. Let's just say I learned early that how you treat people defines you more than how much money you make. My father taught me that. Everything else follows from there. After the interview, Ziwayan introduced me to several of the families moving into the new homes. Single mothers, elderly couples, young families just starting out. One woman, tears in her eyes, shook Ziwayan's hand. You don't know what this means. I've been on waiting lists for 3 years. My kids will have their own rooms. They'll have a yard. Thank you. Ziyan knelt down to her kid's level. You take care of this place, okay? This is your home now. The little boy nodded seriously. I will, I promise. Driving home that day, I thought about the $8.4 million I'd spent. If I'd kept it, invested it conservatively, I'd be living very comfortably right now. Traveling, enjoying retirement, maybe buying a beach house somewhere warm. Instead, I was 65, working full-time, living in a small condo, driving a truck with 200,000 miles on it. And I'd never been happier. Because that $8 million had become something more valuable than comfort. It had become 567 families with roofs over their heads. It had become a company that treated people with dignity. It had become a son who'd learned that true strength comes from lifting others up, not pushing them down. Money grows back. Dignity doesn't. Purpose doesn't. Legacy doesn't. 5 years after the acquisition, Elena got pregnant again. This time, a single baby. Another boy. They named him Richard. I was surprised when Ziyan told me. After everything, you're naming your son after him? Ziyan shook his head. Not after him. Despite him. I'm reclaiming the name. Giving it new meaning. This Richard will grow up knowing that kindness matters more than power. That dignity matters more than wealth. That how you treat people defines your legacy. Plus, he smiled. I kind of like the idea of a Richard Blackwell who's actually a good person. It feels like restoration. Like justice. I held baby Richard in the hospital, this tiny human carrying a heavy name, and whispered to him, "You're going to do great things, kid. Not because of your name, but because of who you'll choose to become." That evening, Ziyan and I sat in the hospital cafeteria drinking terrible coffee. Elena was asleep upstairs, the twins with her parents. "How are you doing financially, Dad?" Ziyan asked. "Be honest." I shrugged. "I'm fine. Getting by. You're 65 and still working full-time because you spent everything on me. That's not fine. I chose it," I said. "And I'd choose it again. I want to buy you a house." "No. Dad." Ziyan, "No. This is important. Your sacrifices got me here. It's my turn to take care of you." I leaned forward. "Listen to me carefully. The greatest gift you can give me isn't a house or money or comfort. It's continuing to be the man you've become. Build good things. Treat people well. Raise your kids to value character over credentials. That's how you take care of me. But you shouldn't have to work in your 60s. I don't have to. I choose to. There's a difference." He went quiet. Then, "Dad?" "Yeah? Thank you. For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. For fighting when I couldn't fight. For betting everything on me." I reached across the table and gripped his hand. "That wasn't a bet, son. That was a certainty." 6 years after the acquisition, I retired for real. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Ziyan threw me a retirement party at the company. Small, intimate, just the people who mattered. Thomas Reynolds gave a speech about the first time we met, how I'd treated him with respect even though I was about to become majority owner and he was just maintenance. Gerald talked about the craziest acquisition he'd ever facilitated and how it taught him that justice and business aren't mutually exclusive. Ziyan spoke last. He told the whole story. Everything. The bathroom, the humiliation, the 6 weeks of hell, the acquisition, the $8.4 million, Richard's downfall, the rebuilding. Some people in the room knew parts of it. No one except Gerald knew the full scope. When Ziyan finished, the room was silent. Then Thomas Reynolds started clapping. Slow, steady, building. Others joined. Within seconds, everyone was standing. I sat there, overwhelmed, as people I'd never met applauded a decision I'd made 6 years ago. After the party, I asked Ziyan why he'd told the whole story. "Because it matters," he said. "Because people need to know that dignity is worth fighting for. That love means sacrifice. That money is just a tool, and what matters is what you build with it." In my final years, I've had time to reflect on everything. The 37 years of work. The sacrifices. The moment in that bathroom when everything changed. The decision to spend everything. The aftermath. People ask if it was worth it. If I'd do it again. The answer is yes. Without hesitation, without doubt, yes. But I've learned something important. The story isn't really about revenge, even though it might look like it from the outside. It's not even really about justice, though that was part of it. It's about value. What we value. What we're willing to fight for. What we're willing to sacrifice for. Richard valued money, status, power. He built his life around accumulating those things, and when they were taken away, he had nothing left. He died alone because he'd never invested in anything that mattered. I valued my son. I valued dignity. I valued the kind of world where good people get opportunities and cruelty has consequences. So when the choice came, spend everything or watch my son be destroyed, there was no choice at all. The money was always just a tool. The question was what I'd build with it. I built my son's future. I built a company that treats people well. I built a legacy that'll outlive me. That's the lesson I want people to take from this. Not that revenge is sweet. Not that you should bankrupt yourself for justice. But that you have to know what you value, and when the moment comes, you have to be willing to bet everything on it. Because the moments that define us aren't the comfortable ones. They're the moments when everything is on the line and you have to choose what matters most. I chose my son. I chose dignity. I chose right over easy. And I'd make that choice 1,000 times over. Last week, I went to Sunday dinner at ZYN and Elena's house. It's a tradition now, every week without fail. The twins, now 7, ran to hug me when I arrived. Baby Richard, now 2, toddled over with his arms up. I scooped him up and he giggled. During dinner, the twins told me about school, about their friends, their teachers, their dreams. The girl, Sarah, wants to be an architect like her mom. The boy, Jack, wants to build houses for people who need them. Just like Dad, he said proudly. After the kids went to bed, ZYN and I sat on the back porch with cigars and whiskey. We do this every Sunday. Same ritual, same quiet companionship. Dad, ZYN said, breaking the comfortable silence. I've been thinking about your story, our story, and I want to write it down. All of it. For the kids. So they understand where they came from. What you sacrificed. What it all meant. I considered this. You think they need to know? I think they deserve to know. They should understand that their grandfather spent every dollar he had to protect his son. That wealth isn't measured in bank accounts. That dignity matters more than comfort. I nodded slowly. Then write it. Tell them the truth. The whole truth. The good and the ugly. Make sure they understand that I don't regret it. Not $1, not one decision. Make sure they know that some things are worth everything. He pulled out his phone and started making notes. What should I title it? I thought for a moment, remembering that bathroom, that moment, that decision that changed everything. Call it what it was. The price of dignity. Because that's what it cost. Everything. And that's what it was worth. Everything. We sat there on the porch, father and son, the Texas stars bright overhead, the sound of children sleeping safely inside. This, I thought, this right here is wealth. This is success. This is what $8.4 million bought. Not a company. Not revenge. Not even justice. It bought this moment. This peace. This certainty that I'd done the right thing when it mattered most. And in the end, that's worth more than all the money in the world. The lesson isn't complicated. You have to know what you value. You have to be willing to fight for it. And when the moment comes, when everything is on the line, you have to be willing to bet it all on what matters most. I bet everything on my son. And I won. Not because I destroyed his enemy. Not because I bought a company. But because 37 years of sacrifice produced a man who builds affordable housing and names his son Richard to reclaim a broken name. Because it produced Sunday dinners and grandchildren who understand that character matters more than credentials. Because it produced a legacy that'll outlive us both. That's the price of dignity. Everything you have. And it's worth every penny.